Yeah, this Gold mic is really great. I paid, I think, 40, 50 bucks for it. So it's not dirt cheap, but it's not that expensive, over like 4 or 5 years. It's not too bad. But the quality of the sound is really good. That's what I like about it. So today's focus is on something that you may or may not want to consider, in future developments. Okay, so one thing, okay, this is not under advanced. Nope, scroll down a little more. There we go. So the focus of today's lecture is really just on user interface design and what Google is pushing, and also a little bit of my take on it. Okay, so there's a little bit of stuff from Android itself and a little bit from me. So this is the first slide. Where did it go? Right there. Okay, there we go. So this is the first. Oh, battery just died. It's okay.
Used to be things would fade out slowly as the batteries would die.
Yeah.
My walkie-talkie wouldn't go as far.
Not when it's digital.
It wouldn't transmit, but it'd still receive.
It just craps out these days. And the interesting part is, they still haven't made these USB chargeable, which is the logical way to do things. And let me see if this is better. Yep, that's good. At least it's green, and I don't know how long it's going to stay green, but we'll see. All right, so it just of course. The moment you ask that question, I don't know how long it's going to stay green.
Ask that question.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing. It's those people on the recording. Cut out, comes back. Oh, it stayed green for a moment. Gone again.
Yep. So this is pretty good. There we go. So we're back in business. And I have 2 more of these rechargeable batteries. So I'm gonna plug my charger in first. Just in case. I don't think it will be running out anytime soon. Okay, so this is Android's own design principles page, in case you haven't visited it. So I just want to kind of go through, what they consider to be important. So, I guess, I'll just kind of disclose my take on these things, along the way, so we don't have to go all the way to the end of today's lecture to really find out. So the first one is, enchant me, delight me in surprise. So in this case, me is referring to the end user. And when you look at these, sentences, they refer to end users collectively as people, okay? Now, I have to admit that I'm not one of these people. So when I look what I look in a user interface is simply efficiency, predictability, and if this works 5 years ago, I want it to continue to work today. If this is how I find a file in a file manager in 5 years, I want it to be the same way now. Okay. Now they can add new features. Okay, I can get to the new features if I want to, but I don't want them to take away the old way of doing things. Okay. Delight me in surprising ways. A beautiful surface, a carefully placed animation, or a well-timed sound effect is a joy to experience. So they're not really talking about the efficiency of a user interface. They're talking about UX, or user experience, which is a whole new thing in the past few years. Okay, I don't think it existed before, like maybe 5 years ago, UX positions. I do not think those positions that existed. But these days, just about any major app development teams has a few people who are UX experts or user experience experts. And it says, subtle effects contribute to a feeling of effortlessness and the sense that a powerful force is at hand. These are all kind of really foreign concepts to me. I'm just, after, okay, this is what I need to do, and I just want to get it done. Okay, I don't really care about the animations or the little nuances. Now, whether I'm representative of the entire population of end users of apps, I don't know for sure. So I'm not a good person to use as a reference. But these things just kind of it doesn't seem relevant to me. Now, does it really help to make an app more competitive? I really doubt that too. Okay, now think about it. Okay, if you just think about it, you're a Uber. Okay, all you want to do is to get a car to pick you up. Whether it's Uber, Lyft, or another company, it doesn't matter because your objective is, okay, I'm here, I need to be picked up, I want to get there. Right?
But if I bring you a limo, aren't you going to call me again?
Well, but does that have anything to do with your app, right? So when you're comparing, Uber versus Lyft, okay, if the Uber or one of them has more animation, has more sound effects, and things just look more beautiful, does it really help change your mind of, oh, because of that, I'm going to switch to that alternative? I don't think so. I think it is the efficiency or the transparency of the app that sells the service. So it's really the opposite. I look at this exactly the opposite way. I think apps should be as transparent as possible. It should be able to get the things done without all the glitter, without all the bling. But that's just my view. Okay, real objects are more fun than buttons and menus. So buttons and menus, we are very, very familiar with because those things existed in Windows 3.1 or before. Okay, I mean these things have been around since PARC, P-A-R-C.
How about the research?
Exactly. The birth of the graphical user interface. It was copied or pirated, however you want to term that, by both Apple and Microsoft. The whole thing, that it sparked the entire revolution of, oh, instead of using a text interface, let's have a mouse, a pointing device, and so that we can click on things, right? And that's why we have buttons. So making things more fun than buttons. We'll talk about this in my example later on. So one of the things that they have done in recent apps is instead of using a toggle button or just a button, or having radio buttons, one is true and one is false, and you just pick one of them. They now use switches. Okay, you might have find that your Android app has switches where you can touch it and it will slide onto on. If you touch it again, it's gonna slide to off position. I don't like that. I don't like it because I have to look at the button to see which state it's in. It is not visual to me. Okay, and two, you still have to touch it, and the button itself, the switch itself, is only using a very small portion of the screen too. So you really have to look at your app and click it, and then after you click it, you kind of have to visually double check, to see whether it is in the state that you want. Okay, but that's just my take. Okay. Allow people to directly touch and manipulate objects in your app. It reduces the cognitive effort needed to perform a task while making it more emotionally satisfying. This is like something completely foreign to me. Okay, last time we talked about personality types, and there are certain personality types where, emotional stuff is just foreign. It just doesn't compute, doesn't make sense to me, okay? I just want something that's easy to click and I can easily visually inspect and go like, okay, it's on, it's off, and the on-off thing is good as long as it's consistent. Because as long as, the left-hand side is on and then the right-hand side is off, if it's consistent, I can easily tell, from the distance whether that thing is on or off. But if you put the caption on a button and the whole button itself has a color, so it's not very easy to read the text on it, that to me is harder to interpret. Okay. Customization. Let me make it mine. People love to add personal touches because it helps them feel at home and in control. So once again, they're using psychology and try to incorporate psychology into the design of apps. Now, I personally like to customize things too, but only because sometimes I have my own way of using the app, and I just want to kind of customize it to the point where I feel it is efficient based on my way of using it, but not so much because of making it fun or making it beautiful. I just want to make sure that I can get to the primary tasks as quickly as possible. Okay, so I can give you an example of what I mean by that. Okay, let's say we're talking about a banking app. Okay, and different people use banking apps in different ways. Some people use a banking app and just want to check the amount. Okay, they want to check recent activities, because the husband doesn't trust the wife, or vice versa. They want to kind of always check, okay, how much money are we spending, where are we spending money on? So they might prioritize certain options. And I only use my app to pay bills. Okay, so I want my pay bill button to be, to get to that button earlier, so I don't have to go through like 3 different menus to get to pay bill. And then within pay bill, there are only certain people, certain organizations that I pay the most, like PG&E, SMUD, Consolidated, that sort of thing, the utilities. So I want those things to flow to the top, so I don't have to scroll all the way down, using alphabetical order. But that's my extent of customization. I just want it to be quick, so when I need to pay my bills, I can pay it easily. Is that making any sense? But some people may have investment with Wells Fargo Bank, or some people may have joint accounts and stuff like that, and they want to check on other things. So I think if they allow customization so that people can reprioritize what flows on top of the first level of menu, that might be helpful. But I'm not going to do it just because of making the app more beautiful or making it more fun. Because a banking app is not, these things are not as I don't think they're important in a banking app. Now, if you're looking for one of those, affirmation apps, there are apps that kind of spew out, affirmation messages, then these things are important, because that's why people use those apps, is to get, a peace of mind, get affirmation, so you don't want to make those apps, too kind of Spartan, as a banking app. This one is interesting. I really like this one. Learn people's preferences over time instead of asking them to make the same choices over and over. Place previous choices within easy reach. So that means your app has to be able to store a usage pattern over time, or has some kind of way to analyze how a particular end user uses the app. And right here, the example shows just typing the first 2 letters. The app can retrieve from recent history a particular entry that matches just LE. And that makes sense to me. Okay, that just makes sense to me. Is that okay so far? Okay. Simplify my life, make it brief, use short messages with simple words. People are likely to skip sentences if they're long. Okay, so one extreme of this is Windows 10. Have you guys installed Windows 10 or perform updates, lengthy, really long updates? It just takes up the entire screen to give you one simple sentence. It'll be done soon. That's it. That's your entire 1080p screen or 4K is just displaying that one message. It'll be done soon. And then 5 minutes later, it will say, we're getting closer. Using the entire screen. You don't see any progress bar. You don't see anything else. You cannot do anything else except reading that one single message on your entire screen. It doesn't make sense to me. If they're trying to say that you should use words that most end users can relate to, so instead of using big words like authentication and stuff like that, you say, okay, who are you, okay, or what is your account name, that sort of thing. That might not make sense to me, but there's a certain point where it doesn't make sense anymore. I don't know about pictures are faster than words. There are 2 issues related to pictures. The first one is accessibility. So if you only use pictures without words, and your app or your platform does not support that, and has no accessibility, that can get an app into serious trouble, especially if it is for education or government purposes. If you just look up, all kinds of lawsuits related to ADA compliance, you will know what I'm talking about. Have you guys looked into accessibility, ADA compliance, that sort of thing? Have you heard about Target getting sued by the Federation of the Blind? No? Oh, you're missing all the good stuff. Because I've been teaching that class for a while too. So if you look up, this is a big one, Target versus Federation of the Blind. This happened a few years ago too. 2006, okay, this is a long time ago. So it's the National Federation of the Blind versus Target Corporation. Now, Target is not even a branch of the government or anything that is funded by government money. Target is a for-profit company. Is it traded? I think it's public. It's a publicly traded company. So, do they really have an obligation to ADA compliance when it comes to online access? Well, maybe, maybe not. Well, as it turns out, the National Federation of the Blind found out that the website of Target at the time was not ADA compliant, which basically means a blind person using JAWS or some of those tools cannot navigate the website the same way as a normal person can. Okay, there are certain pictures of products do not have the alt text, so it doesn't say what this product is. It only displays the image. And Target at the time had a phone line so that blind people can call in to talk to a person to help them shop and place orders. And then the Federation of the Blind decided that is not equivalent of being able to use the website. And then they first talked to Target and go like, you guys need to make it accessible and make it ADA compliant. And then Target said, no, we are not going to spend that money to do it. It's not worth our time nor our money. Now that is a business decision that I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree, but it was a business decision. And then the Federation of the Blind eventually sued Target big time, and I think Target lost, I cannot remember how much money, you can look it up and find out, but it was a big thing. Now, this is a big thing because it opened up the door to all further lawsuits. Because now it has set the precedents. And yeah, go ahead.
I'm following it on the thing, but I didn't know this, but 8% of men are red-green colorblind, but only 0.5% of women.
Yes, but that has to do with the XY versus the XX gene. We don't have a backup copy. If one of the gene is bad, we are done. Whereas, in women, because they have the XX gene, and colorblind needs both chromosomes to be flawed in order to show up in the case of women. But in the case of men, since we only have one X gene, if that one is damaged, we are colorblind. Yep. So it makes sense. Twice as many men are colorblind than women because women need both X chromosomes to be flawed in order to actually have colorblind as a symptom. But they can carry the gene without being colorblind. Yep. So that has to do with the XX versus the XY. Yeah, but when you look at the settlement, it was actually a big deal. It was quite a bit of money. It was $3.7 million in terms of attorney's fees and cost to the plaintiff. And this is not, it continues to be, something that is important because if you look up, I think we talked about this in this class already. If you look up Berkeley, ADA, video, Washington, because the two students who sued or not sued, but to bring this up were from Washington, D.C. There you go. So Washington Times, Berkeley to remove 20,000 free educational videos because two students from Washington, D.C. were not able to access the content due to the lack of closed captioning. So if you think about this, okay, apps is going to be the next thing. I mean, I think the lawyers have not really quite figured out that apps is a big thing too. So, so that means what we were just talking about in terms of Where is that? Got too many links open, too many tabs. There we go. So that means pictures are faster than words. That is true, but whatever you do, you have to make sure that your app is accessible if you don't want to get into the trouble of having the Federation of the Blind or some other organizations to come after you because your app cannot be used by blind or deaf people.
So there's actually a document called the WCAG?
WCAG, yep.
Yeah, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines?
Yep. And they have tools too. They have tools to help you assess whether a website is accessible or not. If it's not, it will point out, okay, this thing is not accessible, this thing is technically accessible, but it doesn't, it's not following all the best practices and stuff like that. It's a big thing in the school, so when you look at the content on Canvas or on D2L or on Moodle, they all need to have to pass the accessibility tests. So it's a big thing. This class, all my class recording is kind of exempt from the requirement of closed captioning for two reasons. One, it is a one-use kind of thing because I do recording every semester. So it is considered a one-use content, and with a one-use content, as long as this class does not have anyone with accessibility needs, it's okay. And then the second one has to do with it's really long. Each lecture is about 80 minutes, and I teach 3 classes. So 3 classes times 2 meetings per week is 6 class sessions. So 6 times 80 is 480 minutes. Closed captioning 480 minutes of content will take at least another 480 minutes with experienced closed captioners. If you don't have the tools, like a foot paddle for pausing and resuming the video, and have the special closed captioning equipment, it will take you easily twice as long. So for each minute of video, it will take you 2 minutes to do the closed captioning. Who's going to do it? Who's going to pay for that? That is the big question. Okay, so, but when you're designing app, it can be an issue too. Now, I don't really know exactly how blind people navigate in apps, but I know a person, Tiffany Montage. She is an IA here with our department, and she is very, very good with her iPhone. Okay, I think in her case, the iPhone would actually speak out all the options, and then she can quickly pick out a particular option. And people who are used to that kind of interface, they can listen to the phone a lot more faster than we can. So they can actually accelerate the text-to-speech option to the point where I cannot really hear what it is saying, but she can pick up all that stuff and easily navigate. So that's an interesting experience for me. Decide for me, but let me have the final say. Take your best guess and act rather than asking first. Too many choices and decisions make people unhappy. So once again, we're getting back to the emotional part of using an app. Just in case you get it wrong, allow for undo. Certain things cannot be undone, so so there's that. So you may not want to beam some pictures onto the internet or onto another cell phone because that's not undoable. Once you beam something, it is out. It's not like editing a document where you can just undo. When you're sending something, once something is out of the box, it is out of the box. Okay. Any questions, comments? But I think all of these point to one thing, at least, is how a person uses an app should now be logged. Because that's the only way you can learn, how that person, how that particular end user is using the app. And then as a result, you have a historical data to help you, quote unquote, optimize the use of the app in the future. So that's something that is interesting in one way, but it is also a privacy issue potentially, because now you can go through that log, somebody can order a subpoena of the records of how a person uses a particular app, and if that log is available, it can be used in a court as evidence of some kind. Is that making any sense to you guys? So I think that's a potential issue with having the app to learn the pattern of doing things, because it will require some kind of logging, and logging can lead to privacy issues. Only show what I need when I need it. People get overwhelmed when they see too much at once. Break tasks and information into small digestible chunks. I don't have a problem with that. Hide options that aren't essential at the moment and teach people as they go. That is hard. Teaching people as they go means that you have to track what a particular end user has not used, or has used very rarely, has not used in the past 2 months, or something along that line, and they go like, oh, since you have not used this recently, you might want to know how to use it, la 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 la. So once again, it goes back to tracking again, okay? Because a lot of these features to try to help end users to get used to a new app requires tracking, because it's like taking a class, okay? You have to track, oh, so far you have been using these features, but you haven't used that yet. And sometimes it can be annoying too, for people who do not want to the app to keep constantly saying, oh, I see that you have not used this feature. Maybe it's time to give it a try. No, shut up, I don't want that. Go away. I should always know where I am. Give people confidence that they know their way around. Make places in your app look distinct, and use transition to show relationship among screens. Provide feedback on tasks in progress. So basically that is just a bar. You can use a bar to show, okay, this is step 3 out of 6, so that people know that, okay, there are 3 more steps to perform. The back button, so in this case, they're showing, booked to detail under the screen in order to give people a sense of, where they are in this particular, app, whatever the app is supposed to do. Any questions about this one? And you can see how much psychology terms they have used in this document. Confident, definitely is a psychology term, and people here is referring to end users in general. So all of these guidelines are really psychological stuff and not technical stuff. Never lose my stuff. Save what people took time to create and let them access it from anywhere. So we are going back to using the cloud as a backend for almost any app. Remember settings, personal touches, creations across phones, tablets, and computers. It makes upgrading the easiest thing in the world. I would totally agree with this part, okay? Because you want an end user to be able to pick up a new device, sign in, and get everything back, and not having to reconfigure, after reconfigure to get the same settings back. But it does get back to the whole issue of privacy as well, and also how do you make sure that people can authenticate to the server properly to get all that stuff back, and no one else can do that. That becomes the big question. So the Google sign-in, not Google sign-in, the Firebase authentication piece is addressing at least a part of this. Any questions about this part? If it looks the same, it should act the same. This is an interesting part. This problem has always been around. If you look at Windows programs, most programs would behave about the same way, having a menu bar, and you find certain items under File, you find certain items under View, you find certain items under configuration or settings and stuff like that. But there are always those certain apps where, hey, how do I do this? Because they don't use exactly the same user interface. So help people discern functional differences by making them visually distinct rather than subtle. Avoid modes which are places that look similar but act differently on the same input. Only interrupt with me if it's important. Later on we'll find out how Google qualifies apps for different types of category of apps. It's kind of interesting. This one is particularly important for Google car apps. Now, I personally have not encountered a car with a Google Car Apps interface, but apparently this is what they're pushing, is to push Android as a UI framework in cars. Now, whether it's a dashboard, like the main dashboard, or whether it is just the entertainment center, I'm not quite sure, but I think they're only targeting the entertainment center, the one that is on the side, but not the main dash yet. But there's probably a push, going to be, on the main dash in the near future. But we'll see that. We'll see some more interesting stuff later on. Make me amazing. Give me tricks that work everywhere. People feel great, once again, psychological terms, when they figure out things for themselves. Make your app easy to learn by leveraging visual patterns. Once again, if you provide visual patterns, you need to make sure that it is in some way ADA compliant. In other words, people who are blind, who are visually impaired, will still be able to use the app, may not be using the visual part, but they will still have to be able to use the app. And that's going to be the difficult part, is because visual stuff, okay, is not always transferable to people who only rely on hearing and touching. Okay? Is that making any sense? There are blind people who program, but it's not easy for those people because they cannot see the indentation. And can you imagine, how you're going to write programs, especially in Android, when you're not visual? Just close your eyes and see if you can visualize the program when somebody just spell out the program to you. They will spell everything, including the open curly brace, close curly brace, indent, and stuff like that. How far can you track the program like that? I cannot do it very far. I won't be able to do much programming done if I lose my sight. Okay, so that's something that I think people have to keep in mind is the lawsuits that have been going on with ADA compliance is going to eventually find its way into apps. That's just inevitable. If Target can be sued for their websites, what's going to stop people suing Angry Birds and go like, hey, this app is only playable and fun for people who can see. I want to play the app too, but I cannot see anything. And Angry Birds is one of those apps where if you cannot see, it's really hard to play. You have to somehow describe what you're trying to hit, the angle of the launch, how much tension is on the rubber band, and all of that stuff without visual feedback. I like this one. This is reflective of a cultural shift. It's not my fault. Be gentle in how you prompt people to make corrections. They want to feel smart. Now, once again, psychological terms when they use our app. If something goes wrong, give clear recovery instructions. Okay, I'm all for that, not a problem. But spare them the technical details. I am not sure about this part because I would like to have the technical detail. I want to know what I'm dealing with. What is the name of the device that I'm dealing with, and how do I fix it? Because with technical details, people can go on to Google search or other search engine and actually use those terms for looking up information. Or they can use it in bug report, okay? Or call up tech support and say, oh, your screen is telling me da 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 da, and at the very end there's a code, and the code says TXG176. That will give tech support something to work on. But if the message only use non-technical, fuzzy, and user-friendly terms to make people feel smart, I'm not sure whether they are going to be as effective when the problem cannot be resolved with that just one screen. Okay, if you can fix it behind the scenes, even better. But certain things you just cannot fix behind the scenes. Sprinkle encouragement, psychological terms again. Okay, so this is not technical at all. This whole page is about psychologically how do you make your app more appealing to end users. Break complex tasks into smaller steps that can be easily accomplished. Give feedback on actions, even if it's just a subtle glow. Do the heavy lifting for me. Make novices feel like experts by enabling them to do things they never thought they could. So that's, it's all very psychological. I personally think that novices are novices. Experts are experts. For example, shortcuts that can combine multiple photo effects can make amateur photographs look amazing in only a few steps. Now, I'm an amateur photographer to the point where I spent an entire summer to figure out, how to do color correction. And I would have to say that certain things make sense. Okay, certain things make sense, like white balancing, automatic white balancing, or be giving an end user a slider to go from warmer to cooler until they find the right spot, or even have comparison, like pulling out two pictures so that they can look at one picture and go like, that's normal, this one is not. How can I slide that color temperature thing to make these two pictures comparable? That makes sense to me. Okay, that it hides all the math behind the scenes. People do not need to know what is 4500K. What does it mean as a color temperature? It's just a slider to slide one way or the other. That makes sense to me. But there's only up to a certain point where you can make things, simplify things. I would say, making pictures more quote unquote clear. Removing the fuzz. That makes sense too. But do you want to really combine all of these things into one single, button? That's kind of different. Make important things fast. Not all actions are equal. Decide what is most important in your app and make it easy to find, fast to use, like the shutter button in the camera or the pause button in the music player. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Any questions, comments, feedback about this page?
I feel better.
I mean, from your own experience, okay, how important are these things? As an end user of apps, or as
I would go with efficiency, transparency. I don't like menus personally. I don't like small targets.
Mm-hmm.
Just those things are most important. But most of the time, I turn the image off my background. I don't want to be bothered by it.
Yep, and it takes up extra resources too.
Especially if you remote in.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of things are really expensive.
Yep.
A lot of this stuff is very CPU heavy. But I guess if you're making an app for that type of experience, and you want them to feel good, this is the priority. If you're making an app for them to do something effective, then the amount of time it takes me to get in and out.
Mm-hmm. I think the one part that really makes sense to me is to kind of track what the end user does and try to make it easier and faster and more efficient to get things done. That makes sense to me. But making the end user happier and feel more like an expert, that sort of thing, I think that's a little bit too much for me.
Well, if I'm going to promote an app to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to basically do it because of one of those two things too. I'm going to feel good about the apps. I want to share it with you, and I don't know if I do that just because it's efficient in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But if it feels good, maybe I'd share it with you.
Well, I think that are more reliable. So reliability is high up on my list. Even if it is a little difficult to use, if I know this app will not fail, and I have used it so many times, I know all the nuances already, I know it's kind of awkward to have to change that, but I know how to do it, it doesn't bother me anymore. But the lack of reliability is what bugs me the most. Okay?
Losing user data is the worst thing to do.
Or if you look at Pokemon Go, if you have to restart the app, like 20 times, in one single outing, that's just not very pleasant. I don't really care how easy the app is to use, how much feedback it gives me and stuff like that. If it crashes, it negates a whole lot of those other things. So this is one page which I find rather interesting. But there are some other the next one is actually very interesting too. I would say this one is even more interesting than the one that we just looked at, which is kind of all fuzzy psychological stuff. This one is only about auto app quality, which is only applicable, the kind of quality stuff that applies to auto apps. And they give you, now this is a lot better because I like it because they have these tests that you have to go through, and then it has a description of each one of these tests. Okay, so they're not really just describing something in a very fuzzy way, but it is actually much more qualitative in this case. Like if you look at the first one, AU-MV, the app does not display animated elements on the auto screen, such as animated graphics, video, or progress bars. That is something that is, that's really discrete. It's either on or off. Does it display something that's animated or not? And they also categorize these things based on type, user attention. Is this app doing something that draws the driver's attention to somewhere else? The app does not display any form of visual or text advertisement on the auto screen. Only audio ads are acceptable. I would say audio ads are just, well, maybe not just, but they are definitely distracting too. Just imagine you're driving, and then your car kept interrupting music or something, and go like, there's a Chevron gas station a mile ahead of you. And then after that there will be another McDonald's, fast food place, and then Walmart is having a sale today, and so on and so forth. I think that is just as distracting. Layout, the app does not display automatically scrolling text, and so on. Now, what makes this page interesting is it also gives you a link to go to the other these quality guidelines, but not only for auto. So if you go back up one step, just go to quality guidelines, and you move down to additional guidelines. There's Daydream app quality. Okay. How many people have logged into Daydream with Android? Not a whole lot. Okay, very good. So this is interesting because Daydream is Android's VR. So they're not, okay, so I'm going to open this tab just so that we can take a quick look at this. So Daydream app quality requirements. So for the VR stuff based on the Android framework, they have these design guidelines. User can focus on objects and read necessary text. App maintains hand tracking. App has a stable horizontal line. Camera movement must be user initiated, and so on. And then for controllers, that's the interesting part. Controller must be used as a laser pointer when clicking on UI targets. So the you can actually find, let's see, I'm trying to find out there's a Daydream controller that you can purchase. And it's a handheld thing. Okay, has anyone looked into Daydream at all? Because Google sell it as a kit. It comes with a wearable thing where you can put your phone inside the whole thing, and it comes with a remote control thing on your hand. It's kind of like a Wiimote, except it's not as complicated as a Wiimote. let me find it for you, because I think this is interesting in many ways, because this is where things are going, and it also reflects where Google is standing at this point with VR. Daydream controller. There we go. And it's about $80. Okay, you can buy it from Google directly and wait for shipping, or you can go to a lot of in-store places like Best Buy has it too. So if you click on this one, it will show you what it is. So you can buy in different colors. Certain parts of this doesn't really make sense to me, but we'll take a quick look. So this is the controller. The controller has several buttons. It only shows you a few big buttons here. This is actually a touch area. So your thumb can be used to use touch as an interface. And then these two are buttons, and they have textures. One is more recessed, so that you don't need to look at it to find out which button you're clicking. There are two buttons on one side. I'm not sure about the other side, but I think there might be buttons on the other side too. So when you're using a VR app, you're supposed to be holding onto a remote control like that. And this is where you put your phone inside. It's kind of like the cardboard Except this one is fancier. I bought one of the original cardboards, and it's really kind of cool. You just slide in your phone, and it has the lens to kind of you focus onto just a smaller part of the screen, and then you just run certain types of apps and give you the VR stuff. But your phone does run really hot. Because most phones are not efficient with dealing with VR type of graphics. Now this one is kind of interesting because it doesn't seem to have any cooling ability to the back of this one. It doesn't give you a fan or even ventilation. So that means your phone is cooking inside. I would not like that. So that's how it looks like. It's probably comfy, but it's going to be hot as well because there's no ventilation of any kind. For $80, I guess that's what you get. It has a little compartment inside for the handheld. Okay, well, but the biggest question is, how do you use it, right? So let's get back to that slide. There we go. Daydream. There we go. So the Google VR SDK is actually available. We haven't really talked about it. I didn't even know about it until today. So this app uses a supported version of the Google VR SDK. So the only thing I can think of is the VR SDK is on top of the Android framework, because this is on top of this is on an Android mobile device. So the VR SDK has to be on top of that. And then there are stability, and performance requirements. Look at this one is kind of interesting that they will have to spell it out. App installs and runs without crashing. Really? But what this is telling me is there are a lot of apps that did not run or crashes frequently, because otherwise they wouldn't have to spell it out here.
I think that's the error code they use when they refuse it or something.
Mm-hmm.
You failed, because it looks like they're kind of analysis codes when they're evaluating the app.
Mm-hmm. But then are they evaluating autonomously, or are they using people to evaluate apps? I would imagine they have to use people to evaluate apps.
Yeah, probably both. Yeah, you could do some of an automated and eliminate a good percentage of them, and then if they pass the wicket, then finally you get a human in the loop.
They can probably just keep clicking random things and see whether the app will close or crash automatically by itself. App loads quickly or provide feedback in VR to the user if the app takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So if it takes 3 seconds or longer, they have to provide visual feedback of some kind to the end user. Apps maintains high performance. That cannot be automated because if it's automated, you have to define what is high performance. So this has to be has to be manually tested.
I like the next one.
App does not display a thermal warning during 30 minutes of use.
As your eye sockets melt.
App renders without an expected distortion when viewed through a Daystream viewer. Publishing, that's just what kind of stuff you have to supply when you publish the app. So it has to have a VR icon. So it has to be like a 3D kind of icon instead of 2D. Has a 360 stereo photosphere. Content matches description for users 13 years or older, and so on. So I think this is rather interesting. I did not know that Android had a VR backend or VR stack on top of the usual Android stack.
They put it on top of iOS and Unity too.
Mm-hmm. The same people?
Mm-hmm. Google, the same VR toolkit.
But nowhere do I see anything that uses your eye for tracking things, for actuating things and whatnot. So that's only because the technology is not there yet. They don't have any ways to look back to your own eyes, so the app cannot see where you are seeing, where you're looking, and that's why those interfaces do not exist yet. There are cardboard apps. So Daydream is one, and then gaming has its own, and then auto app has, this is the one that we looked at earlier. TV apps, Wear apps, and then we have tablets, and then Core. And Core basically just refer to the usual, what we think of apps as apps. So each one has its own, special list of things. The auto app we just saw a little bit earlier. We can take a look at the Wear app. And personally, I really don't know where Android Wear is going, because a lot of times I really wanted to use my Moto, but in the end, this is what I wear on a daily basis. It's just my Fitbit. Okay, so I really don't know whether Android Wear is really quite at the point where it is ready for the market. What do you guys think?
I haven't bought a watch yet.
Now, why would anyone want to buy a smartwatch? That's the first question, right? Besides the novelty and showing people that yes, I have one of those things, for practical purposes, what is the practical application of a Google Watch or Android Wear? You're driving, okay, you get a buzz, and you want to quickly find out without getting pulled over by a cop, because you don't want to pull your phone out to see who just texted you, okay? But if it shows up on the watch, you can just go like, oh, okay,
Well, that's just as bad.
Oh, it's not. No, that part is not just as bad.
It's a distracted driving thing.
No, well, okay, if you're just reading it.
What are you saying?
Okay, if you're just looking and go like, oh, okay, my wife just called me. That's not bad, because it won't take you like half a second to know who just texted you without the actual content of the message.
iOS was going to do this taptic thing. It was going to have,
That is bad.
It was going to codify things so that you just pick it up with senses. Wife called. They
can always hook it up to the Bluetooth of the car. Now that doesn't require an Android Wear. It doesn't require a wearable. Okay. Now if people are dictating to the watch, or the watch is talking to them, now that is super distracting. And I've seen people doing that too.
What did Dick Tracy do with his watch anyway?
There's a button. Dick Tracy actually needs to push a button to actuate his watch, and the same thing with Knight Rider too. In both cases, they need to use the other hand to actuate something on the watch.
Well, they're actually selling a Dick Tracy watch.
Great. I want one of those Star Trek badges, the communicator or tricorder. But I really don't know where the app, where Android Wear is going. They have been trying for many years now, and I don't think the penetration is there.
I don't think the iOS watch did much better. I think the custom watches are gonna just do much better.
The Fitbit is not. They're not making money. If you look up the more recent news about Fitbit, the quarterly report. So if you look up Fitbit quarterly report loss, I don't think they have a net loss right now. So the leader in the connected health and fitness market, it reported a revenue, which means they made that much money, but how much of that is profit? It's they lost money. 10-year history of building this category, coupled with our powerful brand and engaged global community, gave us confidence we are making the right investment to support our vision and drive long-term success. So, but they're not losing as much money as people thought they would be losing. Okay, so I guess it's positive in a way, because I think they're still really trying to figure out what they want to do and what kind of features are supportable And then the biggest problem with all of these things is a moving target, because by the time they release this watch, which is a Charge 2, the next wave of technology becomes available. You can pack more processing power, the sensors will get more sensitive, and so on and so forth. So it's a forever moving target. But I would say Fitbit of all of these devices are probably the most successful one. If you look at the Fitbit, compare that to a Garmin, compare that to the alternatives, they have the best integration of features, and the app is really stable too. It doesn't crash, it just collects the data. So for the most part, I think they're doing okay. The best part of a Fitbit compared to my Moto is with a Fitbit I can, according to Fitbit, the Fitbit manual, a Charge 2 needs to be recharged, can be recharged every 5 days. But based on my usage, it can be recharged in 10 days. Because only after 1 day, I have only used 10% of all the charge. So if you just kind of project it into the future, if I only use 10% each day, I should be able to last easily 7 days, like a whole week before I have to recharge it again. Which is a big plus, because my Moto can last only half a day, if I'm lucky. The other company that is making something that is interesting but is not Android based, which means they're not using the Android ADK, is Pebble. Pebble Watch. And these two companies will be, I think, oh, never mind. Fitbit bought Pebble, I think. So Pebble is interesting because they use the e-ink as a display instead of using LEDs or LCD, even worse. They use e-ink, which means they can maintain something on the screen without using hardly any juice. Because that's the nice thing about e-ink is it's just the energy to rotate the balls so that they show up either the white or the black end, but they don't need to use any more power or very little power once they have flipped the state of each individual ball. So that's the interesting part. They also have color displays and stuff like that, but I believe they're all e-ink based. Even the color ones are e-ink based. So if you look up Fitbit and Pebble, I think Fitbit bought Pebble. Following Fitbit acquisition, Pebble rolling out to update. Oh, so who bought whom? Pebble was acquired by Fitbit, and that was just about a month ago. So we are starting to see some consolidation of this particular market, and the biggest players or the biggest success are not Android based. So I can only predict one thing. Android is going to acquire Fitbit. that seems to be the only thing that makes sense. Okay, is Android is going to buy Fitbit because Fitbit bought Pebble, and Pebble is actually fairly popular because of the long battery life, and just kind of Spartan in terms of features, but it's usable. Unlike an Android watch where you run out of juice in 12 hours, then you have to recharge your phone or recharge your watch every single night, which is not convenient. So I think that's what's going to happen is Android is at some point going to acquire Fitbit, and that is going to be a big change because I don't think Fitbit has the same kind of API framework as Android. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch is how this whole wearable market is going to play out. Any questions?
Did you see the Sony paper thin e-ink?
Mm-mm.
That one's cool. Paper thin one. Paper thin.
Gizmodo. I used to. Oh. Interesting. Is it in production or is it just?
It's the prototype, 2017.
Okay.
CES. So this is the direction they might be going. I mean, the whole band is becoming functional. I don't know if it's just doing, if these are live shots or not.
So it's e-ink based. Are they going to incorporate heart rate, heartbeat sensors and stuff like that? Because if they try to integrate stuff like that, it may not be that thin anymore, and that would also increase battery drain as well.
And these are along the flexible e-inks that are out there. So you can eventually see our newspaper. It's going to be one big e-ink flexible display.
And that was the first time they used similar technology in a science fiction was Earth Final Conflict. Gene Roddenberry's. It's a TV series that was rather short-lived and met a really bad end because I think they just lost people just lost interest because of the way they kept changing the direction of the show. But it was but in the show they used e-ink like flexible displays. So that's the first time that a science fiction made use of a flexible display. Because even in Star Trek: The Next Generation, they only use tablet type technology, which we have now. Okay. Any questions? Any feedback? So I wouldn't be too crazy and try to spend a lot of time to write apps for Android Wear because I really don't know how far it can go. The hardware is the limiting factor at this point. They're just way too power hungry, and battery life is not realistic at all. I mean, I can as a geek, okay, I can charge my phone every 12 hours, but for any type of regular user, that's not acceptable. Having to recharge your phone every 12 hours is not something you want to do. How about Android TV? What is the market penetration of Android TV?
It's getting pretty huge. Is that on Chrome, and it's also on
the stick.
Amazon stick.
Amazon is interesting because Amazon is actually using a lot of Android products. The Android, the Amazon Fire is a tablet, and that's Android based, but it's heavily modified, so it doesn't really look Android based, but it is. So if you look at Amazon Fire, if you look at how much hardware you're getting for the money, that's a lot of hardware. That's a lot of stuff that you're getting for the amount of money that you're paying. And that's because the Android, okay, look at this one here. I'm gonna click on it so that you can see what it is, what you're getting. So they have 16 gig, 32 gigs, so we'll click on the 32 gig version. 12 hours of battery life, 8-inch display, 1.3 gigahertz quad-core processor, which is not top of the line, but it is respectable. And it's a tablet, and you're getting everything for $100. But if you go for the cheaper version, the cheaper version is this one. It's less expensive. It's significantly less expensive. This is a 7-inch display. I think this one is only about $60. There we go. $60, for a color tablet. Just think about the textbooks. Go to the bookstore. Find out, how much each a typical textbook will cost you. This is $60. So I think that really gives you an idea of how inexpensive devices are going. It's just a matter of what are you going to use it for. It's a 7-inch display, which is too small to use as a TV, but too big as a phone. So it's kind of like that.
It's right there with the iPad Mini.
Yep.
Very short-lived.
Yep. But with the problem with iPod Mini is it is trying to be the same. They try to market as a downsized version of the iPad, so people are expecting to be able to do the same thing with their 10-inch iPads, which they cannot using the 7-inch display. But with Fire, it is a content distribution mechanism. That's the only thing Amazon wants to do with it, is for people to read books. Now 7-inch is about the same size as their e-ink version of the book readers. So if you can read a regular book on the e-ink version, this one is big enough for that too. And you can watch TV or watch a movie, because I watch movies on my phone too. It's just a little too small with my 5-inch screen, but the 7-inch screen is significantly larger because it's 40% larger. So it's actually doable. People can actually watch movies, using a 7-inch display. It's still portable enough to do that. So I think that Amazon is probably going to sell these devices, and besides, even if they have to sell these devices at cost, Amazon will still be selling these things because Amazon is selling their Prime membership, they're selling the movies, they're selling the books and stuff like that. So this is just an enabling device to deliver content as far as Amazon is concerned. So Amazon doesn't need to make money on the devices. I mean, $60. I mean, that's pretty inexpensive.
It's just enough to buy it for your kids. I was looking up on the Daily Telegraph about the tablets and technology blamed for speech impediments. The kids don't know how to talk anymore. So get them one of these when they're one. Bad.
Well, I think each generation has something like that to say about the next generation. Like our generation, the previous one to our generation, they already say that we're watching too much TV because they didn't have TV, right? They were saying that we watch too much TV and we don't go outside anymore, but there's no need to go outside anymore. Okay, and then the generation before that, they actually had to work the farms, right? I mean, who's going to work the farm if you don't go out? But these days, you have all mechanized, corporate-owned, farms, and you don't go farm your own stuff anymore. You don't, except for, marijuana and stuff like that. People don't grow their own stuff anymore.
And tomatoes.
And tomatoes, yes. But I would say more people grow marijuana than tomatoes now. But they have similar issues, and that's why you can go across the other forum and find out, so how did those guys get rid of these bugs? You'll be surprised, how much people who grow marijuana, how much they emphasize on being organic. They won't use, anything that is not organic on their plants.
That's why it became illegal in the first place, because they all got lazy and questioned everybody else. That wasn't good during the production time, so they converted it or something. Yeah, I would expect them to question everything.
Yep. Yeah, they look at all the fertilizers. They look at how people deal with aphids and other types of pests, and they wouldn't use off the shelf solutions from Home Depot.
Hopefully not.
Oh, they definitely. I have looked into some of those forums because my wife likes to grow tomato plants. So we get nematode and other types of issues with tomato plants, and as it turns out, people who grow marijuana also have similar issues with aphids and other types of bugs, and they only use organic solutions to deal with those problems, and I was kind of surprised to find out how much those people who grow marijuana are into the studying and the research of side effects of all of these chemicals and whatnot. I was surprised. I was like, wow, I learned a lot of things on that day. So Android Wear is one thing that I would kind of, not Android Wear, but Android Car is one thing that I would kind of keep an eye on, is because I think there's a potential one thing that Android can easily transition into is an in-dash kind of thing, but not the dashboard. Because right now when you go to, if you go to a car dealership and then you look at all the slightly more expensive cars that have an in-dash display, they're all over the place. Chrysler has its own, Ford has its own, Mazda has its own, Honda has its own, and so when you switch brand, you have to learn something completely all over again. And I think BMW was the first one, and they got a lot of flack for their user interface being difficult to use. The infotainment center thing was really hard to use with BMWs. So I think this is one area where Android really have a chance of getting into. But Android Wear, I think that's really up in the air. I really don't see how Android can take over the watch market, not at this point. The competition from alternatives is really, really stiff, especially with Fitbit buying Pebble. That's a big, that can pose a big threat to Android. And then the VR market is also up in the air too, completely in the air. I don't see Android having any real specific advantages over the other types of APIs, other than they have a really huge base of people knowing how to use Android to begin with. So that's the only thing that's going for, with Android. Feedback of any kind from you guys? No? Is anyone planning to do more app development other than phone and tablets? Going into other types of devices?
Oh, I'm going to go after that Arduino board. I'm going to put my stuff. I have hydronics in my house. 14 zones. Hydronics. The floors heat up.
Oh.
So I'm going to build a little app on my thermo sensors and put them in the different areas so I can figure out how to balance the house.
Are you going to use Zigbee or some other wireless?
I was going to go with the Arduino. I don't know exactly what to get started with. You showed us a little $30 board or something.
Yeah, Zigbee is an interesting protocol. And it's inexpensive too. I looked into this because I wanted to automate my backyard watering mechanism, because we have too many zones and and stuff
Same
like that.
thing, right? It's hard to balance it.
Because we have trees and then we have tomato plants. Some you have to water daily. Other things you have to water like once a week, but it needs deep watering. So there's no easy solution because they're not concentrated. I don't have all the trees on one side and all the tomatoes on the other side. It's kind of all dispersed, over the yard. So it becomes a nightmare, to lay out all the tubes and use the right kind of dripper and stuff like that. So this may be something that you want to look into is a Zigbee module. The Zigbee standard is very interesting because it's a very low power standard compared to Wi-Fi, but at the same time it has a long range compared to Bluetooth. So it kind of has the advantage of Bluetooth and also the advantage of Wi-Fi. Well, you can also call it having the disadvantage of both as well. But it's really well suited for slow, lower speed communication. Because if you're monitoring the temperature of your slab, okay, it's not going to change that quickly. If you can get a readback every 5 minutes, that's plenty, right? And Zigbee is great for that sort of thing. And then the other thing about Zigbee is to extend the network. Every node is potentially an extender. So the extent of your entire network is only defined by the furthest node physically that you have in the entire network. So that makes expansion really easy. Unlike Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, when you have a central Wi-Fi router or an access point, this one is much more distributed. And the range of each device to the next device is actually pretty far as well. So if you read up the documentation, I think it outlines the specifics. Okay, performance. So performance-wise, data rate is only 250 kilobits per second, which is not really fast. You don't want to pump media stuff through this. But if you're only going through this with data, like every 5 minutes, you just want the temperature readout, plenty.
Well, you can still do it every second at 250K.
And the range is the killer part. The range is at least 200 feet indoor. That's a lot. And once again, the range is only between the two neighboring nodes. That defines how far you can place your components. It is not that everything has to be within 200 feet of the access point. It's just that between any two nodes, you cannot exceed 200 feet. Which basically means if you want a linear layout with 5 of these devices, you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can have 200 times 4 feet, from the first node all the way to the last. Because that restriction is only between the nodes.
Is that true for the outdoor too?
The outdoor is line of sight range is 4,000 feet.
I know, but the next one is 2 miles.
2 miles. That's a long way.
That's a long way.
Yep. That's the slightly different standard. This is Zigbee and this is XB Pro.
Oh, okay.
So it's a different chipset, I guess. But 2 miles
You go
is,
from 3.1 milliwatts to 63 milliwatts.
that's still nothing compared to Wi-Fi.
It's 30 times more, or 20 times more power to go
Yep.
distance. Yeah.
I would say it's still a good trade-off because if you remember, power to distance, power is proportional to 1 divided by distance squared.
Whatever the square distance.
Yep. So that's what you're getting. But with the regular Zigbee, not the Pro, 3.1 milliwatt or up to 6.3 milliwatts, that's not a whole lot of power consumption. And that's why these things are in home automation devices a lot. So a lot of home automation devices. In my house, I use the Samsung Smart Things as a hub. And all my windows, the doors, the garage door and stuff like that, those devices are all Zigbee or Zigbee derived. And they're only powered by one 3-volt lithium ion cell, and they're good for at least 1 or 2 years. Whereas before I tried to use, what is the other one? X11. Oh man, that was awful. The X11 devices use batteries like there's no tomorrow. Every few months you have to change the battery. So this may be something that you can look into. You just need a hub, as the main station. So if you look up Zigbee, and one really cool place to look up all of these things and figure out how to make all the connections, I found this place to be really kind of cool, which is SparkFun. So if you go to SparkFun and look up Zigbee and stuff like that, they have a lot of cool stuff. They'll sell you the main device you can hook up to a PC that is USB based. Let's see, where is that? So they have XP Explorer, and this one looks like it is designed to interface directly with an Arduino board, which is really cool. This is an XP Explorer serial, which hooks up to a PC, through the serial bus. XP Explorer USB is a USB to serial-based unit for the Zigbee line, XP line. This unit works with all XP modules, including Series 1 and Series 2.5. There you go. I really looked into this once, when I was looking for a solution for the sprinkler control and whatnot. And the best part of this is, the range is so good, especially outdoor. I don't have to worry about, is this gonna reach, those, stations in my backyard. I only have a 0.33 acre lot. way under the range of these things.
But that's where I'd head. I mean, it seems to me like blending robotics and sensors along with an app would be, kind of where I would try to target my skills or something.
I think writing apps for the sake of apps, those days are pretty much over. People have thought about and wrote, all the apps that is self-contained on the phone or self-contained on the tablet.
No more currency converters? No more currency converters?
Or unit converters.
Unit converters.
Yeah, one single app just to do distance, unit conversion from feet to meters. No, we don't need those anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think robotics are really going to be coming up, and sensors are going to come up, and that's going to be the real cool stuff in the future.
It's already starting to happen. What is the Segway, right? Segway. How do you spell Segway?
S-E-G-W-A.
C.
S-E-G.
S-E-G-W-A-Y. Segway. One of the new Segways actually has a Bluetooth interface, so you can be sitting on your couch, and then you just use a remote control on your phone to drive your Segway out to you, so you can hop onto it. So it's already there, but Bluetooth is not the right interface for this type of thing because Bluetooth has a very limited range.
33 feet.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, and you're not going through anything.
Nope. Not 2.4 gigahertz. Your next door neighbor turns on the microwave and then your Segway is going to somewhere that you don't want it to go. Because 2.4 gigahertz is a very crowded band of frequency, and just not a very good band. I mean, your microwave has the same range of frequency, and then Wi-Fi G has the same range of frequencies too. So it's not a very good frequency range to use. But I think what we'll see now is to start to see apps just as an enabling feature to sell something else. To sell a device, to sell a service, that sort of thing. Like Uber and Lyft, both are basically just a service, but the app makes it possible. But the calculator app, I think we're done with calculator apps. Level apps, we're done with level apps. Camera apps, we're done with camera apps.
I'm building them.
Well, you're building one that has that particular feature, right? So that's new. But for the most part, if you just want to snap
just integrating
pictures,
the camera and the microphone in.
Time. Yep.
Just integrating them in there.
Yep.
I'm not building it.
Right.
Camera.
But some people are still doing it. I mean, if you look up, on the Google Play Store, there are still people, trying to push their own camera apps these days. They try to push new features, pre-focusing, la 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 la, But who's going to pay $2 for that app?
Well, and anything good shows up with the next operating system anyway.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So I think this is where these apps are heading for. Is they're no longer just apps for the sake of apps. They're apps to enable something else to be useful, which also means what we read a little bit earlier. About empowering the end user, making them happy and stuff like that. May or may not be applicable. Some of these apps really should be transparent. They should be doing what they're supposed to do with minimal user interface or attention. But I don't see any documentation guideline of how to make your app, transparent. Just make it, as if, it would take the minimal effort to actually get something done.
Or the efficiency.
Oh yeah, there's no guideline on efficiency.
Yeah, you'd have to take a programming class, lots of them.
Well, you have to take some hardware class, to
you
actually understand that.
Most of it's going to be your bad algorithms.
Or not understanding how the framework works, or not understanding the hardware features.
I mean, I picked up the code for the first camera, and it was so sluggish. I just had to keep whittling out everything I didn't need to do until now it's really smooth. I want smooth. I don't want sluggish.
What kind of a device do you have?
I have an iOS, but the device I have, I picked up an Alcatel. I don't know. Walked into Best Buy, found a quad-core, $89 phone.
Not expensive, not top of the line.
Didn't connect it to the net.
Okay.
Just picked
not known for performance.
Yeah, I don't think it's known for performance. It's
Okay.
not, I mean, it's nothing I would want to own.
Mm-hmm.
I just picked it up because I wanted the device.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
And the other ones were way too cheap, and this one was in the
kind of mid-range.
kind of mid-range. Yeah. But that's why I said when I opened it up, I expected all these sensors. I had fewer sensors on my phone than I did on the simulator.
Really?
It's cheap.
Well, I find it kind of surprising because a lot of times,
It's in one chip.
it's a chipset, right?
But
So
they didn't enable it.
that's possible. They just did not enable it. Just like the good old 486, 487.
Qualcomm makes a Snapdragon or something like that, right?
Mhm.
All these things these chips are just packed now with sensors.
Yeah, but Qualcomm is starting slowly but gradually starting to lose their market share because other companies like the one in Xinjiang, China, they have their own fabs for years, but they're using a smaller process compared to Qualcomm. And Qualcomm driver code, the quality of the driver code is not good either. So the whole mobile market is very volatile, because of people trying to push newer devices and newer chipsets and whatnot. Each chipset, each generation never really have the time to mature. They never really got all the bugs out, and then here comes the next chipset based on the old chipset. So instead of fixing the bugs with existing drivers, now they have to spend the time to add features so that the new chipset can be used. So all the old bugs never get resolved, they never got tested, bug reports never got cleared before they create and implement new chipsets. And it just becomes more of a problem these days because the time between generations is now getting shorter and shorter. My first phone using Android 2.3 lasted quite a long time. The device basically died before it got obsoleted. And now we're starting to see, relatively expensive, devices getting obsoleted due to performance. And people just stop using those. It's like, okay, I'm not using my Nexus 5 anymore. Is it broken? No, but the new phone is just a lot better, a lot faster. The graphics is much better, the camera is much better. So I'm just not going to use my old phone.
Feels better. I have an emotional attachment.
Getting back to those psychological terms, to talk about how to create a UX.
It's got edge display.
Yeah, that's just totally useless, just pointless stuff. I'm all
But it
for.
doesn't have a headphone jack.
Doesn't have a headphone jack
Yeah. My iPhone, they took it off.
because they want Bluetooth. Now, is it because they want to save, the cost of the hardware, or is it because they're trying to prevent people from pirating
No, because
music
I
and
think
media?
because they bought the Beat headphones. So they took the jack off to make sure they could sell headphones and earbuds.
So they're all Bluetooth now. There's no.
Well, no, I can still hook it up with the Lightning, but then I can't charge and listen.
Okay.
So when I'm driving in my car and I plug it up into my old, analog stereo device, I'm just draining out my battery. Can't charge it and listen.
I see. Gotcha.
But yeah, there's they're games they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bluetooth's not bad, but everything's inside. I mean, your whole amplifiers, everything's inside your headset now.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the longest time, they were trying to prevent. This is from Trusted Computing. Okay, the Trusted Computing Group, TCG, was pushing no analog output of any the computer devices because they don't want people to be able to pirate the media content. So everything stays encoded or encrypted until it gets to your headset. Then that device will decode the actual stream of content. Which of course is just pointless because people can hack the headset. Instead of driving the little diaphragm, they can now hook it up back to a ADAC, an analog to digital converter, and then use another device to run in Linux to record everything. So I think the industry does not quite understand how easy or how resourceful people are. No matter what they do to try to protect the content, it would just be lost. It would just be hacked. You're just telling people, come hack me, instead of you're just letting people do their own thing. Now you're just waving, go like, this is a new challenge.
It's a small population that can do it, but once it's done, the exploit is evident.
Yep. And it's getting easier for the exploits to be distributed these days, and that's what TCG does not quite understand also. So anyway, one little bit of last thing here. This is just my take on things. So I think the UX or user experience is a little bit overrated. I guess it creates more jobs, but I don't really need the user interface to be happy, to be warm, to be friendly. I want it to be efficient, and I do care about the end user being able to use the app, okay, but not much beyond that point. So I just kind of described my own process of designing a user interface. So I don't really start with what is available. This is getting back to my field target scorecard app. So I want it to be easy. I want the end user to be able to reliably enter a hit or a miss, okay, with good visual feedback. And that's why I popped up these two pictures, okay? This one or this one, they're not easy to tell. What I really want is for my screen to have two buttons. One is all the way to the left, one is all the way to the right. So this way, it's hard to mistype. And then it has a big display here. Is it a hit or is it a miss? So you don't have to look very closely. Because I get to shoot with a bunch of people who are in their 60s and in their 70s, okay? They're not gonna look at a little tiny little switch like this and go, is it on, is it off? They want something that's big, easy to tell.
And vibrates.
Sorry?
And vibrates.
Yep. two buzz means it is a hit, and one buzz means it's a miss. But I'm just describing my own rationale of how to group things together, and what control am I going to use in order to to do what I need to do.
I will say it's an important part of the software, but I've never got into it at all.
The user interface design part.
I would prefer to do back-end logic software that software people use.
And that's the big disconnect, of the whole process, of app development. So you have a whole bunch of people, with the kind of tendency to only work on the back end, the logic and stuff like that. Then who's going to do the front end?
Well, everybody's trained today to do the front end. Nobody's trained anymore.
I don't know about that. I think the front end stuff, based on what we just read today, is fuzzy. Is really, really fuzzy. And from what we can see, they don't really give you any actual guideline of, okay, how do you know whether certain actions that the end user can perform have affinity or not? Because that's the most important part is you only want to present buttons or options on the same screen when actions that can be triggered by those things have a high affinity. They're related. People tend to use those things at the same time, or if they're not, then you have to put it somewhere else. So by collecting statistics of what kind of feature people actually use, that can help the user interface design people go like, oh, okay, what we thought had high affinity does not have affinity, so we should reorganize all the buttons, or have the app to automatically reorganize the buttons. But the app has to tell people where to find things also. So having a search feature of how do I da 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 is going to be useful. So I think that probably pretty much concludes our discussion of user interface today.
There's a Piwik analytics thing too.
A what?
I don't know if it's on Android. So something that allows you to do the usage tracking framework. I'm looking to see. I thought I saw it was Android. 'Cause I've never done any usage tracking.
But I can see how that can be useful. In other words, an app can track, what kind of actual actions are being performed, so that they can establish some kind of statistical affinity analysis. So just based on statistical methods, you can say, okay, most people would use these things, kind of in an interleaved way. So it kind of makes sense to have those buttons on the same screen, so people don't have to switch back, forward, all over the place.
And we could integrate that in the model view adapter pattern, right? So
Yep. And then more and more, people.
But once you upload it, doesn't it become a privacy concern?
It is. And everything has privacy concerns now. Any app that requires you to sign in, probably is logging everything that you're doing on that phone. With a Fitbit, guess what? Your whole day, where you are, what you do, what you're moving, how you're moving, and how you're responding, it's all uploaded to some big, huge server. So if someone is to wear a Fitbit in an act of crime, I'm sorry, but you're done for. There's no way you can get away with that one, because
Did you see the one about the murder with the Amazon Echo?
No.
Yeah, the Echo was in the room, so they wanted to subpoena it.
And I think that's just going to be standard procedure now, is to collect everything digital, collect all the cloud information, out of each case. Suspect okays Amazon to hand over echo recording in murder case. Okay.
So these people that have all these devices in their houses that are listening to everything,
Mm-hmm.
they're recording it too. Just because you don't say Alexa.
I think that the first concern of this was in GM cars. What is their interface, the system to call for support? A voice?
Yeah.
OnStar, that's it.
OnStar.
Yeah, I think OnStar was responsible to nab and convict some gangsters, because they were talking, in the vehicle about how to do something bad, and that was recorded, and the court got a hold of that, and so they were convicted as a result.
We did turn our phones off because we were doing some stuff with some Series A stock investment, and every time we'd say Series A, the phone would go beep beep. It took us a long time to figure out why the phones were beeping at us.
Oh, it was recording the whole
It was
time.
recording everything, and then when you said Series A, it was Siri.
But doesn't that take up a lot of juice, to be doing voice recognition the whole time?
I would think. I turned all that off. I turned all of it off.
Hmm.
I turned all that experience stuff off.
I think with Google, you have to click a button, and then you have to say, "Okay, Google," and then it will pay attention. But you have to click a button to get it started. Yep, but that's interesting. This is interesting. So Amazon had pushed back against Benton County prosecuting attorney's demand for the information from the smart speaker, setting up a legal battle, pitting investors. So this is basically, another case like the iPhone thing, with the San Bernardino shooting, the shooter. They
Right.
got a device, but they cannot see the content, so they
What
have
is
to.
unreasonable search?
Mm-hmm.
What is your personal domain? It's like when the cops are picking up and asking you for your phone.
Can they?
I don't know what the answer of it was, but they were, yeah. Checking to see if you did any text messages, things like that, before they wrote your ticket.
Because in order to get into your house, they have to get a
Binocular?
no. In order to get in your
See,
house,
this is the first case of when you're using technology to enter their premises, and so even a pair of glasses is technology used to.
yeah, but search warrant, that's it. Search warrant is what they need in order to get into your house to collect evidence. And if they don't have a search warrant, you can say, nope, you cannot come in.
But what happens if they see it through your window?
That's why I have a window blind.
I know, but then they use opticals, then they use sound reflectors to pick it off the windows. At what point
No, not
I mean,
not
it's
not
no
Sac
long-
County sheriffs.
Well, no, I'm saying it's no longer even entering your house. I mean, now with technology, they can monitor it, like, you know, your power consumption back in the days when everybody had grow lights and,
Mhm.
you know, they were monitoring you from even externals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then this is just another technology because we're not in your house, we're at the cloud. It's already left your house.
I can see a market of selling, add-on to houses like a Faraday cage, and then thermal, insulation, and also your radio waves, jamming and all kinds of stuff. Anti-surveillance technology. There has to be a market for that.
And then what you've got, you said you had one for your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you already got a smart card
Yep.
blocker.
RFID. Well, in the wallet, it's just an RFID blocking, mesh of copper, and it does work. Okay, I can put my card, in my wallet and bump it up to the next to the sensor. Nothing happens.
And then what do they call them? Fobs? There's fobs everywhere now too.
Fobs?
Those get tracked. Yeah, FOB.
They don't do much of the fobs anymore because key cards is the next, is the thing to replace all the fobs. We used to have fobs on all of these doors, but the manufacturer of the fob-based locks, they went out of business like 10, 15 years ago. So we could not find replacement parts, including the batteries that go into the locks themselves. So eventually we had to remove all of those locks because there are no parts to repair those things anymore. So now that's why we ended up with keys, lots of them.
That's old school.
That is very old school, and it doesn't really help to improve security either. All right, well, I think I'm gonna stop the recording now. We are only one lecture away from the end